prison. In the literal sense, people in there are not free to come in or out. Their families are not free to come in or out. You're not free to visit them. Or surplus humans of the wrong kind. 80% of the people in Gaza are refugees, or children of refugees, from towns and villages that are now in Israel. They are a demographic threat to Israel. This is why they're kept in a prison. If they were Jews, Israel would not only welcome them back, but it would give them housing, it would help them get jobs. In fact, Israel is trying to recruit the right kind of human. You see organizations, state-sponsored organizations like Nefesh B'Nefesh, trying to attract American Jews to come and live in Israel, often on the land of the people who are now imprisoned in Gaza. So it is specifically an explicitly racist policy. And I'm very clear about the terminology, because the attribute by which you're given rights or privileges is involuntary. The Israeli state's definition of Judaism is not one that you choose. Palestinians can't wake up and say, we decide to be Jews. It is an arbitrary attribute, as arbitrary as skin color or eye color, in Israel's definition of what it means to be a Jew. It is an utterly racist policy. Where are we heading? If these trends continue, it's very clear that violence will escalate. Palestinians are already within historic Palestine, if not already the majority, equal in number to Israeli Jews. So you have to think 10 years out, or 20 years out, or 30 years out. Will a Jewish minority be able to maintain control of a Palestinian majority forever by force, in a political state of affairs that has no legitimacy, that is totally rejected by Palestinians and resisted by them? Israel would like that. Israel says, we would like to be recognized as a Jewish state, that we have a right to exist as a Jewish state. It's very unlikely that Palestinians are going to accept that, ever, because to them it means that Israel has a right to discriminate against them. Let's just think this through. Let's do a thought experiment. If Israel says it has a right to exist as a Jewish state, let's accept that for the sake of argument. What does that mean? If you have rights, what happens if someone violates your rights? What happens if someone violates your civil rights in this country? You go to court to seek redress. I understand, are there any law students in the room? I understand there's a law school here. Well, what you do if you have a right, what you go to court to seek? Justice. You go to seek a remedy. What is the definition of a remedy? Law students, come on, this is like law school. I'm asking the questions and you have to answer. Come on.
Sometimes an injunction to prevent someone from behaving in a certain way.
Right, but the remedy has to follow what? It has to be legal. It has to be something that is, if your neighbor has harmed you by demolishing your house, the law will never say that you may go and demolish his house. It may ask him or her to make amends, to repay you. There may be criminal penalties and so on. So a remedy has to be legal in character. It has to be it has to fit the characteristics that the community has decided are acceptable. Well, what is the remedy if how could Palestinians violate Israel's right to be Jewish?
Being born.
Being born in quantities that are too numerous for the tastes of the state of Israel. What is the remedy for Palestinians being too numerous? Killing them is an extreme one, but certainly Palestinians are killed. But they would have to be killed in much larger numbers to restore Israel's right to be a Jewish state if they're too numerous. What are other remedies? Deportation, ethnic cleansing, expulsion. Can anyone think of a remedy for Palestinians violating Israel's right to be a Jewish state that is not utterly repugnant? I challenge anyone in this room to find a remedy that does not violate the most basic principles of human rights. Yes?
Well, a parallel to that is Israeli settlement. You're asking for the removal, the ethnic cleansing of Israeli settlements from the West Bank. Where are the Jews in the West Bank going to go?
How is that a parallel?
Well, you're talking about the ethnic cleansing of if Arabs are too numerous. Then what do we do with them?
Hold on, please.
So what are we talking about?
I'm in charge. Yes. Okay. Well, I mean, that's an interesting idea, of course, but the problem is...
Isn't that what you're asking for? I mean,
No.
Isn't that what Palestinians are asking for?
Well, there's a difference. There is a huge, enormous difference. That the settlers are on land which they have taken by force from somewhere else. I understand that the settlers say God gave it to them. I get that. But that has absolutely zero validity in international law, because I can say God gave me anything. I can say God gave me this lecture hall, and you should all get up. But that don't make it so. So I get that the settlers say that God gave it to them. But we're talking about reality on planet Earth, which has to do with legal rights and human rights. So the settlers have taken land which is not theirs, by force, and the kind of violence I described. So it's not a fair exchange to say, we get to keep the land we took in the West Bank, and in exchange you get to stay.
Wait a minute.
But, hold on, let me finish my point. We're already kind of flowing neatly into discussion here. We'll make it formal in a minute. The point I want to make here is that, if I come into your house, all right, and I move my family in the middle of the night, and you wake up in the morning and you discover this, and I say to you, ma'am, I'm willing to share your house with you. What do you say? I don't think you would say,
Let's have a debate.
yes, let's have a discussion about it. So settler colonialism is different from the rights of indigenous people living on their land. However, having said that, I am actually not talking about removing the settlers. What I believe needs to happen is to remove their status as settlers and as privileged people in an apartheid system. This is what has to happen. So you need to regularize their status. They can stay where they are in many cases, but obviously there would need to be the permission of the original landowners, where there are individuals, and more than 40% of the land on which the settlements were built in the West Bank is private land that was confiscated from Palestinians, and landowners may not want to sell the land. The settlements would have to become desegregated. There would have to be equal housing opportunity, something that doesn't exist now. In fact, Israel's going in the wrong direction because they just passed a law. I'm not sure if it passed its final reading or preliminary reading, but it's in the news the past few days, allowing towns to decide, towns in Israel, this would cover about 70% of the towns in Israel, to refuse to allow people to move in if they don't fit. And this is a way of legalizing the kind of discrimination against Arabs that I talked about earlier. So we need to remove the status of settlers and make them into ordinary citizens. And we need to elevate the status of Palestinians and make them into ordinary citizens. In other words, we need to recognize that in this territory,